What's up, you guys? Welcome back to another deck tech video. This time we're going to be doing another deck doctor. Haven't done one of these in a while. The easiest way to contact me is on Twitter. I have it linked in my description. So if you go over there and you @ me, send me your link to your deck, whether it's on max field or tapped out. I'll do my best to go over it and try to add what I think would make your deck better. This deck list is coming from Sutek H. Wolf. Hope I pronounced that right. So this is an Atraxa Praetors voice +1/+1 counter deck, focusing around, of course, +1/+1 counters. Now, when I do these, I don't claim to know how to optimize every single commander, because especially when it comes to a commander like Atraxa, it's very open to interpretation, depending on what you think is strongest between +1/+1 counters, loyalty counters, infect, -1/-1 counter synergies, whatever you want to fool around with as far as the proliferate goes. It's just what I think would work best with what I'm given, and just my own comfort zone personally. So being a +1/+1 counter deck here, you're going to see synergies with mostly creatures, and I don't think I have to go over what Atraxa does, but just in case, Flying, Vigilance, Death Touch, and Lifelink at the beginning of your end step proliferate. So while this is a creature deck, of course you want to take advantage of some planeswalkers in here, and he has Basri Ket and Oko Thief of Crowns. Now in the new version that I made, I decided to leave these two in here. I only added one planeswalker, which I'll get to, but these are pretty solid. Basri Ket's ult is actually the best reason to play it. The plus gives a creature a +1/+1 counter and makes it indestructible until end of turn, so that makes it easy to attack with our Atraxa with little consequence. And the ult gives you an emblem with, at the beginning of combat on your turn, you get a 1/1 white soldier creature token, and then you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So that right there is very good. You're going to want to have abilities like that, because there are certain cards that benefit off of just getting more +1/+1 counters. That'll let you get more mana with certain cards, that'll let you get more card draw with certain cards. And then Oko is just Oko. You have a really good +1, probably the best +1 in the game. Target artifact or creature loses all abilities and it just becomes an elk. So the creatures here, Walking Ballista is a win con in here. There are actually two primary win cons with the deck that I noticed, at least. I don't believe there's anything else, except for maybe one creature in here. But Walking Ballista does partner up here with Heliod's Uncrowned. There's no Mikaeus the Unhallowed in here, because Mikaeus is really just meant to take advantage of good persist creatures. And if you're going to use Mikaeus with Walking Ballista, you're going to want to have a sack outlet, and I don't think this is the kind of deck that needs a sack outlet for really anything else. So it would just take up spots in this deck for very little reason outside of just a combo. So the combo, if you don't know, Walking Ballista, you give it lifelink with Heliod's ability, and then whenever you gain life, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature or enchantment you control, so you get to do this infinitely, where you remove a +1/+1 counter from it to deal 1 damage. Since it has lifelink, then you gain a life, and then you put a +1/+1 counter on it, replacing the one that you removed to deal damage, allowing you to do this infinitely and hit each one of your opponents. What we have here, we get some mana dorks, pretty standard, especially if you want to make your deck more competitive. You want to have your turn 1 plays, makes it easier to do something turn 2 or 3. And Bloom Tender is great if we're playing a 4-color deck, because she can tap for 4 mana. Now, Mikaeus the Lunarch is something I decided to take out, but I get why he wanted it in here. That second ability, you get to remove a counter from him when you tap him to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. But when I go over my version of the deck, we're just going to see what I decided to add in. Incubation Druid's another good mana dork. If you get a counter on her, she will then tap for 3 mana of any one color. Get that good mana flexibility. You don't need Llanowar Elves in here, because you want a mana dork that can tap for more than just green, because it'll make it easier for you to play Atraxa. Scavenging Ooze is another good card in here. I think I decided to take it out, but there is a land substitution that I think you can make that will still benefit you. The +1/+1 counter synergy I think is a bit overrated with Scavenging Ooze. You only get the counter if it's a creature. And Thassa's Oracle is another win con, of course, a really good go-to win con in more competitive decks. And we're going to see exactly why. It's not because we can draw cards really well in this deck. It's actually a couple other cards that we can get to, that once we play our Thassa's Oracle, we pretty much just win the game. Brina the Demagogue is a great new addition for an Atraxa deck, especially if you want to play +1/+1 counters. I'm totally on board with Brina in this deck. Because it's a political card, it means you're also going to make deals with your opponents. If they attack someone who isn't you, they attack a player who has more life than another opponent. They get to draw a card, you get 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature. If you're the one doing the attacking, you get to draw a card and put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature you control. Really sweet. And Flux Channeler, really great card for +1/+1 counter strategies. The Proliferate is so powerful. Whenever you cast a non-creature, you get to trigger that. And we have Rayhan, Last of the Abzan, kind of like the Ozolith, which you're also going to see in here. Crystalline Crawler is so good, especially if you get the deck going with any kind of combo with +1/+1 counters, because then you have a ton of mana to work with. We have Fathom Mage, very similar. The more counters you get on it, the quicker your deck's going to be. Forgotten Ancient, I think, was one I ended up taking out. It's just a little bit too slow for me. I do like the potential with cards like Fathom Mage and Crystalline Crawler, if you're able to then just dump all those counters onto one of those cards. But again, I just think it's a little bit too slow for what I ended up wanting to do with this kind of deck. Glen Elendra Archmage is a great one. Definitely left her in here, just because we have a ton of ways of putting +1/+1 counters on our creatures, making this pretty much a guarantee that as long as you have a blue mana available, your opponents are not going to be able to cast what they want to cast to hurt you. And then we have Girard, Gokari, Litchlord, which I guess could be considered a third and final win con, just because we have a way of getting so many +1/+1 counters on our creatures that once you get Girard out there, you pay that 3 mana and you sacrifice another creature, each opponent loses life equal to the sacrificed creature's power. So you have a ton of ways of winning in this deck, and I think that's a really cool thing about this original deck list. A Master Biomancer, of course, if it's about +1/+1 counters, never really hurts to make this dude bigger so that you can keep playing more creatures, get them even bigger. Toothy Imaginary Friend, don't remember if I left this in, but it's kind of the same deal with why I didn't want to put any sack outlets in here. You do want to have a way of getting rid of Toothy on your own. I just think we have better card draw that we can immediately get to. The fact that Toothy does require a way to get rid of Toothy is a bit of a downside, but you do have a nice combo here with Toothy and Girard. So if you get Toothy big enough, you could potentially kill everyone. If you don't kill everyone, you just draw a bunch of cards. And then Seedborn Muse, because Seedborn Muse is never bad. I don't know if there's a specific synergy with Seedborn Muse in here, so this might be another card you would consider taking out. I think it's good regardless. Even if it doesn't synergize, having more mana to work with is never a bad thing. Kind of the same thing with Consecrated Sphinx. They're just pure advantage cards. There's nothing really bad about not synergizing with anything in particular. Consecrated Sphinx just fills your hand up really quickly. And Vorinclex Monstrous Raider. Getting double the counters that you put on permanents, I think, is important for this deck. You get double your +1/+1 counters on whatever creature we have here. It could be Fathom Mage, Crystalline Crawler, and you get the benefits of doing that. And then Elesh Norn, I don't know if this was originally supposed to be more of a Phyrexian themed deck with the Praetors, but I have a feeling that's kind of where he was going. Again, just because it doesn't synergize with any counters theme doesn't mean it's worth taking out. It's still useful as a hate card. I mean, Elesh Norn is one of the better hate cards in the game because of just how much she can deal with. And then the sorceries, you get some good card draw here in Ponder and Preordain, get some good search here in Demonic Tutor and Grim Tutor, and then 3 visits and Farseek for land search. Ranger's Path was something I decided to take out, just because when it comes to getting more lands, when it comes to getting ramp, you don't want to have to spend more than 2 mana. Toxic Deluge is great removal, and Tezzeret's Gambit will help us proliferate. I think that was a really cool card to leave in there, just for that synergy of getting more counters. And then our instants, we have Brainstorm, great way to draw, instant speed. Demonic Consultation, in addition to Tainted Pact down here. Those are the 2 combo cards that you're going to want to play in response to Athos' Oracle trigger, so that you deck yourself out and then you win off of her trigger. Path to Exile, I think I took that out and just substituted it with Swords to Plowshares, because it's the better of the 2. Vampiric Tutor, another search card. Veil of Summer, makes it harder for our opponents to counter our stuff. Abrupt Decay, uncounterable removal, and Counterspell and Dovin's Veto. Not a lot of counter magic in here, but you have Glen Elendra, so if you need it, you can go get it. Dispark, Anguished Unmaking for more removal. Cyclonic Rift, again another great removal card. And we have Heroic Intervention and Teferi's Protection. It'll help us keep our Atraxa and friends out there. And then artifacts, we have Astral Cornucopia. It's a decent mana rock if you're looking to fool around with a pure counter strategy. Again, it is kind of in that uncomfortable area for me where it's 3 mana and above. And yeah, you can proliferate it, you can make it bigger, but at some point you have to question the effectiveness of spending a lot of mana to get more mana. It's not really something I think works anymore in Commander, so I think I ended up cutting this out. So we have Sol Ring, and then we have Arcane Signet and Orzhov Signet, which was one thing I definitely wanted to add in here, was a little bit more mana ramp. The Ozolith, of course, great for +1/+1 counter strategies, and he has 2 really good equipments here in Sword of Feast and Famine, and Sword of Truth and Justice. I think I ended up leaving one of these out, and I'll give my reasoning for that in a little bit. The Great Henge is a great card, doesn't really seem to matter if it synergizes with plus and plus one counters. It does, but even if it didn't, I would still agree with putting it in here. Just because you're a creature-heavy deck, it's going to be very easy to get it out there, and you're just going to be drawing a lot of cards off of it. And the enchantments, you have Hardened Scales to get more counters, Sylvan Library for card draw, Branching Evolution, twice the plus and plus one counters, Rhystic Study for more card draw. Unspeakable Symbol is a really cool card because you can pay 3 life to put a plus and plus one counter on your Crystalline Crawler or your Fathom Mage, so it essentially becomes pay 3 life to draw a card or pay 3 life to get a mana. Felidar Retreat is a nice card. I think I ended up taking it out though because what I put in, you'll understand why. Getting a landfall trigger in this deck, it's not the easiest thing to do. It's not something that you can take advantage of unless you have something like a Fertilid. And even then, I wouldn't even consider making it a big part of the deck. But it'll all make sense when I show you the enchantments. Smothering Tithe, great way to get some more mana. Doubling Season, of course. Never hurts to double your tokens and your counters. So the lands, I think I left the lands alone. Maybe some graveyard hate in the form of that one desert I'm trying to think of, but I'll have it in the final deck list, don't worry. Alright everyone, so for the updated version of the Atraxa deck I have here, I decided to include Jace Wielder of Mysteries just because it still affords us the ability to use Demonic Consultation or Tainted Pact if we lose our Thassa's Oracle, because we could lose it to something like a Praetor's Grasp. We could lose it to just counter spells or any kind of removal, and then that's a lost strategy, so I at least wanted to have one other card in here, and it's still good. If you get to that -8, you draw 7 cards. I just think Jace Wielder of Mysteries adds a little bit more to the deck. I ended up adding an extra mana dork here in Avacyn's Pilgrim, just because it's another mana dork that can tap for a non-green color, making it easier for us to cast our Atraxa. I threw in an Eternal Witness because I think it's important to have some sort of graveyard retrieval in the deck. That was the one weakness that I think needed to be addressed over really anything else, was just the ability to get something back from the graveyard. We have that now in Eternal Witness, and at least one other card I decided to throw in here. We have Scurry Oak, which is a new card. It does combo, so I added yet another combo in here. It's not something I would say wins you the game on the spot, but what Scurry Oak does, if you don't know, it has evolved, so whenever you have another creature with greater power or toughness, gets a counter on it. Whenever one or more plus and plus one counters are put on Scurry Oak, you get to create a 1/1 green squirrel creature token. So if you have any way of putting more plus and plus one counters on it, you get even more squirrels. And I think I left pretty much all of the other creatures there. I took out the Forgotten Ancient, but I think I left, for the most part, a lot of these creatures in here. And going to Sorceries, again, I took out the other Land Search card, just because I don't think we really need to have anything more expensive than 2 mana in here. And you have that in Farseek, you have that in 3 Visits. The one sorcery that I added just to make the deck a little bit more consistent, because it allows you the ability to get to something like a Consecrated Sphinx. It allows you to get to a problem solver like an Ellish Norn pretty quickly. That is Eldritch Evolution. So you sacrifice a creature, then you search for a creature card with converted mana cost X or less, where X is 2+ the sacrificed creature's cost. So you sacrifice your Atraxa, you will get to a Consecrated Sphinx. That is something I think you definitely want to look for, even if you have a lot of other good search cards in here like Grim Tutor and Demonic Tutor and Vampiric Tutor. Eldritch Evolution will cheat a creature into play. And I thought about making this more of a Protean Hulk deck where you could easily search, but again, the problem of not wanting to go off theme with too many sack outlets, that was a big concern for me. And kind of the same idea with Birthing Pod. I didn't make this a Birthing Pod deck because that, I think, would take it in a completely different direction than what I think the original deck was supposed to be. And that's not my goal with these, is to change the direction of the deck. It's to enhance what was already good about this. So going to instance, big card I added was Noxious Revival. You could also add, if you wanted to, a Regrowth if you wanted even more graveyard retrieval. That's the 2 mana sorcery speed version of this. But for 1 mana or 2 life at instant speed, you get to put target card from a graveyard on top of its owner's library. So that's a great way that you can get back something that's important for your combo. And then we have Swords to Plowshares to replace the Path to Exile. I don't think you should have Path to Exile in here over Swords to Plowshares. It is way less beneficial for you to give your opponent a land compared to life. And we go to artifacts, where I probably made the biggest change per card, I would say. I added in a Felwar stone just to replace, I think there was an Orzhov signet in here, and I also tossed in a Simic signet, just because green and blue are the two most heavily used colors in this deck. I took out the other sword, because I felt that while it does synergize, it does let you proliferate. I would much rather have the trigger, where you get to force an opponent to discard a card and you untap all your lands. You still get the protection from two different colors here. I just had to make a cut here. Quite frankly, you could choose one or the other. I just like the fact that you're able to get that powerful trigger and keep your turn going. Big card I added was Conquerors Flail. This is kind of in the same vein as Grand Abolisher. As long as it's attached to a creature, your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. And this was designed with Commander 2016 in mind, so you're going to have 4 colors. If you equip this to Atraxa, she's going to get +4/+4, and that's swinging with 8 commander damage at least, in addition to +1/+1 counters. Suddenly, commander damage becomes very viable. And just looking at our enchantments, I believe I took out that Felidar enchantment, but you now will see why, because I have Cathar's Crusade in here. Having Cathar's Crusade in an Atraxa deck is insane, because Proliferate only works on the creatures that already have +1/+1 counters on them. This triggers whenever you have a creature enter, doesn't matter what kind of creature, token, non-token, which is why I also have Scurry Oak in here, because Scurry Oak combos with Cathar's Crusade. Whenever you get a counter on Scurry Oak, you get a squirrel. Whenever you get a squirrel, you're going to get a counter on each of your creatures. It doesn't win you the game on the spot, but it does allow you to win pretty easily with a lot of other cards, and especially with Girard. If you're able to win with Girard, Crystalline Crawler, you shouldn't have too many problems. And the only difference in lands would be the Scavenger Grounds right here. Just because I took out the Scavenging Ooze and I felt a little bad about taking out some Graveyard Hate, and I never just want to take out Graveyard Hate without replacing it. So Scavenger Grounds is great because it just sits on the field, and you get to hit more than one graveyard. You get to exile all cards from all graveyards. Well, anyway, Sudek H. Wolf, thank you so much for reaching out to me. I enjoyed making this Deck Doctor video. I tend to stay away from Atraxa. It's been a long time since I've made a deck tech video for her. She's one of those most commonly played ones I think everybody's experimented with. They kind of know her like the back of their hands now. But nevertheless, this was still a pretty fun experience for me. As for the rest of you, I will have this linked in the description below, so if you want to, you can go check it out over on Moxfield. Follow me over there. Follow me on Twitter, so if you feel like shooting me a deck link, I might check it out. I might make a video about it, no promises. But if you catch me at the right time, in my free time, I might be able to. Void here signing off. I will see you all next time.